Namaste, everybody. I'm Ami Ganatra, and I'm extremely privileged to be on this platform today of Sri Aurobindo Forum. आज का मेरा टॉपिक महाभारत से रिलेटेड है. It's a story very close to hearts of a lot of us. But before I start the content discussion, I want to narrate a story related to how the writing of Mahabharata happened. Actually, it's a legend. I won't say it's a story also. It's a legend which is known in parts of Uttarakhand and I think now even across India. So there's a place called Mana, which is a little beyond Badrinath in Uttarakhand. And there is a Vyas Kutya, where they say Vyas Gufa, a cave where Vyas Muni lived, it is said. And he had in his mind developed this whole itihas. He wanted to make the story of Bharatvarsha, the Vansha of Bharat, immortal. So he had developed this story, which he knew of, right? So he developed the story and he wanted to narrate it so that somebody could write it for future references. But now, who would be capable of writing such an immense epic of that proportion? That is an epic that is going to be so deep. Who else than Ganpati? So Vyasmuni approaches Ganpati ji, who's also staying in a gufa in Mana, and he tells him that, Ganpati ji, please become my scribe. I want to talk about this story, this itihas of Bharat Vamsha, and please you write this story for me. So Ganesh ji agrees, right? But Ganesh ji wouldn't do something that's easy. In fact, it has to be challenging. It has to be worth his effort. So Ganesh ji says, okay, fine. I will definitely pen this story down. However, Lekhani ma avatishtet. My pen shouldn't stop writing. So if you keep narrating without a break, I will be your scribe. Okay, now Vyasji is not the one to back out. So he agrees. He said, sure, I will not stop talking. However, I too have a clause. Abudva ma likha kaschit. If you do not understand what I'm saying, do not write it down. So unless and until you have completely understood what I'm saying, only then you write it down. So Ganeshji says, Om, and the epic gets written. And it is said that there are some verses which Vyasji made so complex that Ganeshji had to take time to think through and write, and then that bought time for Vyasji as well to think through. So this is the story or a legend of the writing of the Mahabharata. I really like this story because who else apart from Ganeshji, right, to write down an epic of this proportion? So with our pranam, our namaskar to Ganeshji and Vyasji, I would start the narration. I would talk about the content of today. So Namaha Ganeshaya, Namaha Krishnaya. Mahabharata. We all probably know the story of Mahabharata. ऊपर से तो हम सब लोग जानते हैं largely what is the story about. B.R. Chopra's TV series made it even more immortal and known to the masses. And Mahabharata is at least a 5,000-year-old itihas. In fact, if Nilesh ji, going by Nilesh Oak's estimates, it is at least 7,000 years old. But even today, when Mahabharata comes on the television, we are all glued to it. Even today, if you see the discussions happening around Mahabharata, they are so passionate. We identify with those characters in Mahabharata. We have our favorites. We debate, we argue whether somebody did something that was right or that was not right, that was just or that was not just. Why is that so? Because Mahabharata is a story that captures an entire range of human emotions. It has jealousy, it has ambition, it has revenge, it has vengeance, it has dealing with losses, it has struggle, it is about helplessness in face of circumstances. It is about making tough choices where maybe both the choices are not something that would lead to an happy ending. So somewhere the struggles in Mahabharata are so real that all of us relate to it so closely. And that is why it is said that everything about human beings, the dharma, artha, kama, moksha, the goals, the desires, the effort that man makes in his life, Mahabharata covers all of it. It is said, Yanniha asti tat sarvatra, atra nasti na kutrachit. Whatever you find in Mahabharata, yad iya asti, you will find it in other places as well. You will find it anyatra as well. But what is not found in Mahabharata, you will not have anywhere else. So that is the comprehensive Mahabharata. That is the comprehensive story that we are talking about here. Across entire Mahabharata, there is one underlying theme though. It is about what is dharma. Every character has his struggle. He's trying to see what is the right mode of action. They're all faced with different problems in life, and they're all trying to figure out whether this is the right way to behave or this is not the right way to behave. Some people are aware of these dilemmas, others not so much. But every action that anybody takes impacts the entire community and the society of the Mahabharata times. So what is dharma? Dharma is not religion to start with. Religion could be one aspect of it, probably, but dharma is not religion. Our Shastras define dharma as dharyate iti dharma. Dharanat dharma ahu. Dharyate, that which upholds, that which sustains, that which allows continuation of life, continuation of an institution. That is dharma. In fact, the root word of dharma, dhri, that is the root word also of dharti. That is also the root word of dhairya. So you see, it is something which gives you an adhishthan, a substratum, which will allow progression of life, continuity of being. Even Sri Aurobindo defines dharma. He says in a primary sense, dharma is a natural law which governs our entire being, and not just human beings. It governs everything that you see around us, right? So Surya has a dharma, Earth has a dharma. If Dharti stops rotating and revolving, if the distance between sun and the earth is not maintained, there will be no life. So the dharma of the earth is to ensure the rotation revolution happens, right? If the helium-hydrogen diffusion does not happen in the sun, we will not get the light and energy that we are getting now. So sun also has a dharma. Living beings around us have a dharma. They have a natural instinct, that inherent swabha, that allows them to reproduce, that makes them detect dangers and survive, right? They all have a survival instinct for the propagation of their species. And so do human beings. So dharma is also which guides the interaction of human beings with one another. At any point in time, we play different roles in life, right? We can be daughters, mothers, wives, professionals, citizens of a country, citizens of a part of a community. We play all these roles. And to ensure the institution of that relation continues smoothly, there are certain rules and regulations, certain code of conduct defined. That also is dharma. However, unlike other living beings, unlike say the plant and animal kingdom, we have been given something more. Buddhi, man, ahankar, the brain complex or the mental complex. Now, the brain complex, the brain system, what does it do? It is because of these three together that we have progressed as a society. We have evolved as a society. It has given us this element of free will. But when there is free will, that also means we have to make choices in life. We have to decide. Now, when there is a choice to be made, there are options. Options may or may not be to our liking, but we still have to decide. And that is what creates dharma sankata. For example, I am a mother, say for example, and I'm also a working professional. So I have a promotion meeting due today, which is really important for my career progression, and suddenly my kid is not well. Mother dharma conflicting with my career dharma. What should I do? Very common for all of us, right? I am a daughter. My parents are old. But I have a very, very good offer from US to go and work, which will get me a lot of money. But my parents need taking care of. What do I do? These are individual dharma sankatas that we deal with, right? Maybe the impact is only on us. Then there are dharma sankatas which are even larger. Say, for example, the question that we deal with. When a terrorist is killed, Should the body be handed over to the family or not? Right? Handing over the body is a humanitarian gesture. But then when the horde comes out and we make a hero of a terrorist, it's not so. Then which is the right way to go? There's something called as euthanasia, mercy killing. Should state allow mercy killing? Another moral dilemma, right? These are some of the bigger questions. Now, what does Mahabharata have got to do with this, right? Mahabharata starts off with the Dharma Sankata. And everybody in Mahabharata has some or the other conflicting priority, conflicting role to deal with. And we'll take some examples from it to see what this is, and accordingly, and then eventually we'll wrap it up, trying to see if we've understood what is Dharma. So, as you know the story of Mahabharata, Shantanu, the king of Hastinapur, he falls in love with Ganga. And Ganga again has a clause. She has a shart saying that I will only be your wife if and only if you don't ask me any questions. If that you fulfill and you let me do whatever I have to do. So at that point, Shantanu is infatuated. He really wants to marry Ganga. So he puts his husband hat on and says, sure, no worries. I'm not going to ask you. And then they get married. Now they have kids. 7 sons are born to Shantanu and Ganga. And Ganga goes and drowns one by one, everyone in the river. Till now, Shantanu was sticking to his pratigya, right? Of whatever as a husband he had given to Ganga. But now he's also a father, right? He has seen 7 of his kids die. He's also a king who's looking at an inheritor of his kingdom. That part of his, that hat of his, of the father and the king becomes so strong that he cannot stop now. And he asks Ganga, he tells her, what are you doing? Of course, Ganga then says, okay, you have saved this 8th child from drowning when he has the 8th kid. You have saved this 8th child from drowning. However, I can't stay with you anymore. And Ganga goes away. And this 8th child is Devavrata, who becomes Bhishma going forward. So you see, Bhishma survives, or Bhishma is born as a dharma sankata of his father. His father chose a certain path from that conflicting emotions, conflicting roles that he was playing, and Devavrata was born. Then we also know, we know about Bhishma's pratigya, right? So old Shantanu again falls in love with Satyavati, and this time Satyavati's father has a clause. He says, I only let you marry my daughter if her sons will become the inheritor of this throne, but and not Bhishma or not Devavrata at that time. Clearly Shantanu doesn't agree to it, but he is very upset. So what does Devavrata do? Devavrata puts on his son's hat and he says, nothing doing, I will do all that makes my father happy. And he goes ahead and he takes an oath that he was never going to marry, never have kids, and he will always just take care of the throne of Hastinapur. And anybody who's the king, he will see his father in that king and do as he's been told to do, ensuring that there is no harm coming to the throne and the king. So he takes this pratigya, and this is such a bhishana pratigya, such a bhayanak pratigya, that he gets the name of Bhishma. That's how he gets the name of Bhishma. Now at that point, great, right? He was a loyal son, a very dedicated son. He didn't know what was going to happen in the future, and he made a decision knowing whatever was known at that point. How do we make decisions? Just to digress a little bit, right? There are 2 usually parameters we have in mind. Either we have complete knowledge of what's going to happen from now to future to everything, or we have complete intuition and intelligence, which will give us an idea that, oh, maybe this could happen, right? However, we live in an imperfect world, and hence we do not have complete information, and none of us have that best intuition that can tell us everything. So we take a decision based on what we know at that point in time, and Bhishma thought this was the right way to go. Okay, fine. Till here, no problem. But then things change going forward. Satyavati has kids. Both of them die. One of them leaves behind 2 wives, but without any progeny, Vichitravirya. Now the situation is different, right? Because Shantanu has passed away. Satyavati's sons don't exist anymore. Now the question is of Hastinapur. who will manage and run Hastinapur? There is no progeny, there is no lineage to continue. So Satyavati tells Bhishma, and as we all know, she says, you should marry these two young girls and have a kid with them, and you are anyways the rightful inheritor, so go for it. But Bhishma says, nothing doing, I have decided, and there is no way I'm going to back out of it. Let whatever happen. Whatever happens, I will never ever get out of this pratigya. This is my pivot in life. Okay, then we know what happens. Ved Vyasji is called, and Dhritarashtra, Pandu, Vidur are born through him. Then, okay, the Kauravas, the 101 Kauravas are born. The Pandavas are born. They don't get along well. Eventually, Hastinapur is divided. The barren, infertile Khandav Prasth is given away to Yudhishthir. Duryodhan keeps Hastinapur. Okay, fine. Then what happens? The game of dice. Dyut Krida. Now, Dyut Krida is meant to deceive the Pandavas, right? Everybody knows that Shakuni is gaming this. Everybody knows this is unfair. But Yudhishthir has agreed to it. Okay? Fine. He agrees to it in his whatever addiction, in his delusion. He takes away everything. And it comes to a point where Draupadi, a lady, a Kulvadhu is brought, is literally insulted in the entire, in the palace, in the assembly. And an attempt is made to disrobe her. Bhishma at that point, he is the patriarch, he is the oldest of the clan. What does he do? Nothing. Sure, he's very, very upset. He's really upset. He really wants to do something about it. But something keeps binding him down. Why? Because Dhritarashtra, the king, doesn't say anything else. And Bhishma, per his pratigya, cannot do anything which is not favorable to Dhritarashtra. Or whatever Dhritarashtra doesn't want, Bhishma cannot do. So he keeps quiet. Vidur takes a contrary stand, right? Vidur tells the assembly that this is not right. Vikirna, who's Duryodhan's brother, he takes a stand. But Bhishma Pitama doesn't. Eventually he tries to make Dhritarashtra understand and stuff, whatever. But at that point he doesn't, because again, the pratigya is the pivot of his life. Okay, fast forward, 13 years end. Now war is going to happen, right? Every possible route of peace has been explored. Duryodhan doesn't listen to anything, and war is going to happen. Now the point to remember here is that Duryodhan was so sure of going out and warring because he knew that Bhishma Pitama, Dronacharya, they will definitely fight on the side of Hastinapur. He knew it so well, right? Because he knew these are the people, as a Kshatriya, they will never ever violate the pratigya that they have. And that is exactly what happens, right? Bhishma has again a sankat. What should he do? But he has decided that the pivot of my life is my pratigya. So even in a conflicting situation, he holds on to that pivot that helps him take a decision. Okay, so there are multiple instances of dharma sankat. There are multiple instances of dilemma that come in front of him where he has to make a choice. He makes a choice, but that choice is always related to the pratigya. Fair enough. So as a Kshatriya, even in the direst of situation, he stays true to the pratigya he has made. Okay, just hold this thought for now, that holding on to a pratigya, was it in accordance with dharma, the dharyate iti dharma, or not? And we will come back to this later, right? Actually, there is also no right or wrong, because we are trying to assess it in the hindsight. So hindsight always is wiser, right? But even then, let's try and learn whatever we can from that. So he sticks on to his pratigya. Now let's talk of Duryodhan. Duryodhan has no mental dilemma, no moral dilemma. He has no dharma sankat. Because to have a dharma sankat, he needs to be aware of the consequences of his actions. He has to be aware of the multiple roles he is playing in the society. Duryodhan doesn't care. he has only one thing in mind. He hates Pandavas and he wants to get rid of them. That is it, nothing else, right? Because if it was only about the throne, then after the split of the kingdom happened, he should be okay. But he's not, right? He's not okay. He wants to destroy Pandavas, and he goes ahead and schemes and everything. He knows that these people are Pitama and all that are not in favor of a war, but he still knows they're going to fight for me, so he goes ahead and fights. He doesn't even want to give them the 5 gaons, right? Even though the Pandavas have played by the book till then. They accepted the Vanvas as it was a condition laid down that whoever loses will go to the Vanvas, right? But Duryodhan has no dilemma. He's like, okay, I hate Pandavas and I need to get rid of them, come whatever. In fact, his friendship with Karna also has that basis, right? It's not as if he's suddenly in love with Karna. He likes Karna because Karna challenges Arjun, and that is good enough for him. Anyway, so this is Duryodhan. Now, why has Duryodhan become like that? He's son of a king who cannot see, and son of a mother who does not want to see, right? Now, Dhritarashtra is one who is aware of the Dharma Sankalps. He knows that there are multiple options here, conflicting roles here. He's playing the role of a father as well as of a king, a caretaker of the kingdom. But in spite of being aware, he does little to really go take the right. He does little to fulfill his role of the king, right? Because in his mind, he's always thinking that he's been given an unfair deal. He was not made the king, and just because he was blind, and Pandu was made the king. This keeps eating him, and that one thing justifies all his actions, right? In fact, Dhritarashtra is a character for which we can easily say, who lived by Janami Dharma, Nachame Pravrutti, Janami Adharma, Nachame Nivrutti. I know what is right, but I cannot do it. I know what is wrong, but that is all I can do. Because my Putra Moh is not letting me get out of it. Eventually, Dhritarashtra doesn't want the war. He even tries to counsel Duryodhan, but it's too late by then, right? So, again, awareness of Dharma, but a pivot in life is Putra Moh, and he can't go beyond it. The Putra Moh decides all his priorities, okay? Okay, now I will stick to characters within the family. And I don't want to talk about the women characters as of now, not in this talk, because largely the women characters have sort of lived up to the roles expected out of them, right? Kunti is a very strong character. Draupadi is a very strong character. She has pretty much lived up to whatever was expected out of her. There are some questions around that, but anyways, not dealing with them here. Gandhari is an interesting character. It is not so much given in the text about Gandhari, but there's one aspect which I always think, that did she not ever have this dilemma that, okay, I blindfolded when I was getting married to Dhritarashtra? Because at that time I was only a wife. Now that I have my kids need right kind of sanskaras and upbringing. Maybe removing the blindfold would be good for them. Did she never have this thought? Now we don't know, because Mahabharata doesn't talk of it. Mahabharata only glorifies the act that she has done. But think of it, right? Would Duryodhan be a different person if Gandhari was probably a little more engaged? If Gandhari hadn't decided to just blindfold and not see? Who knows? Anyways, that's why that's also not what I want to talk about. I also don't want to talk about Karna, because a lot of stories that we know of Karna are actually not true, at least not true from a Mahabharata perspective. There are a lot of legends around him. And discussions around Karna become so passionate that nobody knows eventually what is right or wrong, right? Everybody picks the favorite instance. Actually, like we have this whole decolonization process, we also need a dekarnization process to actually tell us what was the real Karna per Mahabharata. Anyway, so we keep him out for now. The one thing though is that Karna is who's said he's a great friend. The thing to note here is that Karna aggravates the tamsikta of Duryodhan. That's the only point I want to make here. and also lets him not see the various dharma options that he has in front of him. Anyways, now let's talk of Bhim. Now, for Bhim, it's interesting. Bhim has two goals in life. Okay, one is Bhim wants to ensure that people around him, his near and dear ones, are always safe and happy. And for that, for making them safe and happy, he can go to any extent. He will kill Kichak to make Draupadi happy. He will drink the lahu, or he will rip apart the chest of Dushasan, because that would make Draupadi happy, right? He will also fight with Yudhishthir to put forth his points. He does not, when he does not agree with Dhritarashtra, with Yudhishthir. In fact, when the game of dice was going on, Bhim says that if you weren't my brother, I would have burnt your hands for staking all of us and staking Draupadi. But in spite of all that, there is one pivot in his life also. And that pivot is to never violate what the elder brother says. So whatever is the situation, one thing is for sure in his mind. I might agree or not agree. I will stick to what my brother says. Now you see the pattern. It's not as if people are not confused. People have struggles. They struggle with different roles that they are playing. But we all do that. You know, we set a priority in our life. That priority is our pivot, and that somehow makes navigating through some of these dharma sankatas, through some of these dilemmas easier. So that is for Bhim. As I said, his pivot is Yudhishthir. Whatever Yudhishthir says, that's fine. Now Yudhishthir. Yudhishthir is a very interesting character, right? Because he's called Dharmaraj. He understands dharma. He understands what is right, what is wrong. He understands justice, and everybody accepts that he does. But he is not free of human folly, right? He is not free of addiction. He accepts the game of dice, which is fine because that was a norm of the day for the Kshatriyas. But once they start playing and once he starts losing, even though he knows that Shakuni is cheating, he cannot stop himself. He keeps taking till his brothers and wives are also staked there and he loses them, right? However, see what he does. Now his sense of justice is very strong even in that situation, right? He has accepted that Shakuni has cheated, but he was okay with that. He did not complain in the beginning. He raised no objections in the beginning. So when he loses everything, he still does not have any right to complain because he has accepted those rules upfront, right? However, he accepts the 13 years of Vanvas because instead of complaining, because he takes it as his prayashchit. He was wrong in staking all things that he staked. He was wrong in not knowing where to stop. And that is why he kept his version of the bargain. The rule that was laid out that you take Vanvas, he does that. He does the prayashchit by living through that Vanvas for 13 years. Now, when he is in the Vanvas, at that time also he knows that the war will happen because he's aware, he knows all of them very well, right? He knows that Duryodhana is not going to keep quiet. Now, although he was doing a prayashchit, although he did not want a war at any point, he allows Arjun to go do tapasya, get Divyastra. He listens to the advice that he gets that use these 13 years to prepare for a war. Don't waste it. At least be ready. In case something like this happens, you have to be well prepared. So he allows Arjun to gather Divyastra. They all are preparing for the war, right? So he has this thing in his mind. Once 13 years end, he doesn't want a war. He's hoping till the last that there will be peace. That is why he's also okay when Krishna says, okay, even if we get 5 villages, we are fine. But Duryodhan doesn't like it. But when now the war happens, Yudhishthir accepts that as well. He is not bewildered like Arjun is. We know Arjun. We'll talk about Arjun in a bit. But Arjun is so bewildered. He thinks, oh, I'm going to have to kill my near and dear ones. Interestingly, Yudhishthir does not have this doubt. Because in his mind, he's clear why he's fighting it. And then you will see further as well in a situation with Arjun, which shows that he's clear what he wants in life. Yeah, what right or the wrong in life is. So that is Yudhishthir. So now what works for Bhim is that he has a pivot which is always going to help him at least go on the right track, okay, from a righteousness perspective. Actually, even in the war, to convince Arjun to fight, Krishna had to narrate the entire Gita, right? But for Yudhishthir, who had never spoken a lie in his entire life, it didn't require too much convincing to say, tell Dronacharya that Ashwathama has died and make it a half lie, right? Because you have never lied. So he says, Ashwathama hata narova kunjarova. Because everybody knows that Dronacharya will listen only to Yudhishthir. Everybody also knows, including Yudhishthir, that there is no other way of stopping Dronacharya, because Dronacharya has decided his loyalty and he will ensure win for Duryodhan. And this war was a dharma yudh. Also, before this, there were enough and more instances done by the Kauravas to break all war code of conducts, right? So while he was hesitant, it didn't require too much convincing for him. Now, was that dharma, that a guy who has never spoken untruth is okay with twisting it? Compare that to Bhishma, right? Does not. His pivot in life is his pratigya, does not violate. Here, Yudhishthir does. Was that right? Was it not right? Right? Again, hold the thought. We'll come back to it. Now we come to the main part, Krishna and Arjun. We all know about Gita, right? 13 years Arjun has waited for this day. 13 years. He has prepared, he has done tapasya, he has gone to Swarga to get all the astras and shastras. In that, he's even taken the shrap from Urvashi to live like a eunuch for 1 year, right? He's done all of that. All the time he knew who he's going to fight with. But he's fine. Till that time, nothing happens. But when he actually sees them, he forgets why he's fighting the war. His clan cap becomes much stronger. His attachment, his relation, that becomes much stronger. He forgets that all peace routes were already closed. That is why the war has happened, right? And then Krishna explains to him what is his role, which is the hat he should be wearing in this conflicting priorities that he's facing. What should be his role? Now this concern is a very genuine concern which Arjun had, right? There was going to be devastation. Entire Kauravas were wiped out, but not just Kauravas, his own family, the second generation of Pandavas was wiped out. All the sons, including Abhimanyu, all the sons of Draupadi, right? So it was a destructive war. Any choice he made was going to be a bad choice. But what should be your consideration, right? Why he was fighting that war? That war was not for the heck of it. That war, as we understand, was to establish a society with the right kind of value systems. That is what a dharma yudh was, that he was fighting for. Anyway, so Gita happens, we all get lucky with the Gita Amrit, and Arjun decides to fight. But is he really convinced? Has his dilemma gone away? No. That is why you see till 10 days, till the 9th day also, he is not really willing to fight Bhishma Pitama. And Bhishma Pitama goes on a ravage. He kills like thousands and thousands of soldiers of Pandav army, right? Although he doesn't kill Pandavas, that he's sure he doesn't want to kill them, but he kills the army ruthlessly. Arjun finally agrees to fight when Krishna jumps in and says, forget my pratigya. Krishna has decided he's not going to fight in the war, right? But seeing Arjun behave like a weakling, so mentally conflicted, that Krishna actually jumped in and says, nothing doing, I don't care for my pratigya. My responsibility is to ensure that my army is not getting killed that way. So if you don't do it, I will kill Bhishma. That is what then jokes Arjun, and he decides to fight. Also, when Drona is killed by this Narova Kunjarova, that time also he is not very happy. He is very upset at Dhrishtadyumna for killing Dronacharya in his moment of weakness, right? Okay. But there's another incident, and this incident for me is really the part of Gita which explains what dharma really means, right? It's a very interesting incident that happens on the 17th day of the war. Karna is the Senapati at that time. Karna is doing a great battle. He's fighting a great battle on the 17th day. And of course, he's also lost. He's won some, he's lost some. But that day, especially, what happens is that he has a duel with Yudhishthir, and he ends up injuring Yudhishthir really, really badly. So Yudhishthir goes back in pain to his shibir to rest and get the medicines and then come back. Now, not seeing Yudhishthir on the ground, Arjun is flustered. He's like, no, I need to go see how Yudhishthir is. So Krishna and Arjun leave the battlefield and go see Yudhishthir. When Yudhishthir sees Arjun, he is extremely happy. He thinks now that Arjun has left the field and come alive, which means Karna must be absolutely dead. Only then this is possible, right? But Arjun says, no, I just came to see you. Karna is not dead. I was worried about you, so I came to see you. And that makes Yudhishthir very, very angry. Now you see, we have a picture of Yudhishthir in our head, right? But even in this moment, Yudhishthir is very clear that when you're fighting a war, you be on the battlefield. You don't come looking for people. Don't bring in your emotions when you are in a situation like this. So what Yudhishthir does? He screams at Arjun, left, right and center. To the extent that he says, you know what, Arjun? You are a big coward. I thought you are a warrior, but you really aren't. Because if you were a warrior, who would leave ongoing battlefield like this and come just to check on the brother, right? He says, actually, you are afraid of Karna. You don't want to fight Karna. That's why you're making all these excuses. This Gandiva bow of yours, this Gandiva Dhanush of yours, what's the point of that Dhanush? Give it to Krishna and you become a charioteer. You drive the chariot. Tum unki gaadi chalao, rath chalao, and let Krishna fight. He will do a much better job. Okay? So, now, of course, Kshatriya blood Arjun has too, right? So he also becomes very angry at this insult because he had not run away from the battlefield. He was just concerned. The emotional Arjun had come to the fore, right? The brother hat was on. The warrior hat wasn't. So Arjun is now bubbling with anger. But not just because of what Yudhishthir said. Arjun had taken a pratigya, the pratigyas galore in Mahabharata. So Arjun had taken a pratigya that if anybody says anything to my Gandiv, especially that hand over the Gandiv to somebody else, I will kill that person. That is my pratigya. Now Yudhishthir had said this. Don't think Arjun had ever even imagined a scenario like this, right? But a pratigya is a pratigya, because if you don't fulfill your pratigya, you are supposed to not be in accordance with Kshatriya dharma. What do you do now? So Arjun is all ready. He gets his talwar out and he wants to kill Yudhishthir. Now Krishna is watching this, right? And he is aghast. He's like, oh, hello, what are you doing, right? What just happened? Are you going to be killing your brother? And Arjuna tells him, yeah, I have to. I don't have any other choice because this is the pratigya I made. So Krishna says something very interesting. Even in Gita, if you remember, Arjuna is saying, na yotse govindam, I can't fight anymore. My relatives will be killed and all of that, right? So at that time, Krishna says, ashochan anva shochascha pragyavadascha bhashase. You are grieving for something that is not worth grieving over at all. And you talk like you are a very smart, intelligent person, right? So he says something similar again here. He says, Balen iva pura vratam krutam. Like a child without thinking, you took a pratigya at some point in the past. Tasmat adharma sayuktam maurkhyat karma vyavasasi. So he said, from that stupid pratigya that you had taken thoughtlessly, you are going to be doing a dharma of killing your brother. out of your stupidity, maurkhyat, that's what he says, maurkhyat, from your murkhta of taking that stupid pratigya, you are going to be killing your brother. You talk as if you know what is dharma and adharma, what is kartavya and akartavya, but do you really know anything? You don't know anything. This is what Krishna says. Now, Krishna and Arjuna are of the same age, right? So they have a very informal relation. They talk to each other like this, and Arjun looks up to Krishna. So Krishna is very, very harsh when he needs to be. Now Arjun is like, yeah, now what do I do, right? You help me out of this. So then Krishna says, I'll tell you a story. And he tells him a story of this rishi named Kaushiki. So Kaushiki Rishi is living in a forest, and Kaushiki Rishi has this pratigya that he will never ever speak a lie, come what may. कभी भी झूठ नहीं बोलना है, असत्य नहीं बोलना है, कुछ भी हो जाए. Once he is doing tapasya in his ashram, and two people from the village nearby, they come running. So Kaushiki is like, "Arey, kya hua? What happened? Why are you guys running?" So they say, actually, there are two dacoits who are trying to loot us and kill us, and we are trying to protect ourselves. So we are going this way. They might come your way, and they might ask you, so please tell them that we went the other way. That will save us. Okay. Now what happens is that the dacoits come, the Daku come there, and they ask the Rishi. Okay. Now, see, think about it. One is a pratigya that this Rishi has held all his life, right? That is the central pivot of his life. And here are two people whose lives are going to be destroyed. What do you do? Nothing more. There can't be a bigger dharma sankat. What does Rishi do? He says, okay, they are hiding there, and he shows them, he speaks the truth and shows the dacoits the place where the villagers have gone. Villagers die, they are looted, all that happens. But Kaushiki spoke the truth, right? He held on to his pratigya. Bhishma held on to his pratigya. He held on to his pratigya, Kaushiki. Eventually he dies, and then instead of going to Swarga, he goes to Nark. And he asks Yamdev, ki bhai, ye kya hai? I lived a life of truth all my life, and now this is how you treat me. This is just unfair. And Yam tells him, what dharma are you talking about? Because of you, two innocent people got killed. Without any fault of theirs. They trusted you. But all you cared for is your attachment to your pratigya. You were so self-centered that you didn't care what was going to happen to them. So what dharma, what satya are you talking about? Okay. So this is the story that Krishna tells Arjun, and he tells him the same thing. That think of it, right? You made a pratigya, you are saying that is satya and you cannot violate satya. But is that really satya? Because sometimes speaking a lie is a lot more beneficial than saying the truth itself. In that situation, an untruth is a truth, and truth is an untruth. And as a wise man who knows dharma, you should be able to identify that. In fact, he also gives some examples where sometimes it is essential to know the difference between what is right and what is not, right? Now, we have been given a set of virtues to live by in life. And these virtues are important, right? Non-violence, ahimsa, satya, aparigraha. All these are very important values in life. Not killing, speaking the truth. Because if we don't live by these virtues, the society will be in anarchy. There will be no sense of justice at all prevailing, right? People will be killing each other. So living by these virtues is extremely important. And that is what even Krishna says. That yes, satya paramo dharma. Ahimsa paramo dharma. But sometimes you have to know whether a satya is really a satya or a satya is a falsehood. And he gives some examples that if some innocent's life is in danger, if your own life is in danger, if your rashtra is in danger, right? In such cases, it's okay to lie sometimes. Because what you will gain out of lying is going to be a lot more longer term impactful on the society. So that is one. The other thing he says, vivaha kale. So in a wedding, sometimes it's okay to lie. And that reminded me of an incident, right? My dadi was still around at that time, and uh, we know somebody, aged couple, and we were just discussing with them, not a direct relative, somebody we know. And we got to know that auntie dadi, that she was dadi's age, she was actually older than uncle. Okay. And I was like, oh wow, this is so progressive. How is that auntie was older than uncle? Did you not know the age? And my ba tells me in Gujarati, she's like, "Aau to chale," ऐसे तो होता है. At that time, what would have happened is that the one who was getting the marriage fixed, he would have just fudged the age a little bit. Because if everything else is fine, this is such a stupid thing to worry about. A year here or there, some months here or there. But the person who are involved, the bride and groom, sometimes can be very, very hung up on such small things which have no bearing on life afterwards. So in that case, if the person in the middle who's setting that up, he lies a little bit, it's fine. Yeah. Even now you see, there are some people so hung up on, नहीं, 5-2 तो होनी ही चाहिए. 5-1 भी नहीं चलेगी, right? Is that a criteria for living a life? Of course, people might want it. I'm not even saying what is right or wrong. I'm just saying what Krishna is saying. Krishna is saying in such situation, if 2 lives are going to improve, it's okay to lie. His words. Idam Krishnasya, idam namama. They're Krishna's words. He is saying that it's okay to lie in such situation. So you see, he has explained to Arjun a very subtle aspect of dharma, where dharma, what looks as dharma can be adharma, and what looks as adharma can be dharma. Okay, then eventually, just to complete the story, Arjun says, fine, I get it, I will not kill Yudhishthir, but I have to somehow fulfill this pratigya of mine. So what do I do? So Krishna says, you know what, for somebody who's really respect worthy, if you call him tu instead of a, tvam instead of bhavan, that is already an insult, and then you insult him, that is already like killing that person. So fine, so then Arjuna does exactly that. He calls Yudhishthir tvam instead of bhavan, tu instead of a, and he insults Yudhishthir left, right and center. So then it's equal and everybody survives and everybody is happy. Acha, now it is not as if Bhishma doesn't know this, right? In Shanti Parva, when Bhishma is on that bed of arrows, Yudhishthir goes to meet him and he asks him that, okay, when you are faced with such a moral dilemma, what do you do? And Bhishma Pitama explains that there are 2 situations. One is a samanya situation and one is a apad situation. Samanya situation is what we usually deal with. Some problems here and there, but it is not as if it will lead to the death of anybody. It's not as if any innocent is getting killed, right? It's not as if anyone's life is getting destroyed or a nation is getting destroyed. That is samanya situation, where all these things about never speaking a lie, never doing violence, all these things hold true, and they should hold true. However, there are some situations where it gets a little muddled up, and there he says exactly this. He says, Kaschit adharma dharma rupo asti, dharma adharma rupo asti, ubhau gyeyam vipaschita. Exactly what I was explaining before. Sometimes dharma looks as adharma, adharma looks as dharma, but a vipaschita, a wise man, would be able to tell. Okay. Now, let's look at certain examples in Mahabharata. Let's take the example of Krishna, right? Keeping this definition of dharma in mind. Krishna is telling Arjun to not run away from the battlefield, right? He's telling him that everybody will talk bad about you if you run away from the battlefield. You should stand and fight like a warrior. However, in Krishna's own life, when Jarasangha kept attacking, eventually Krishna ran away to Dwarka. We still call him Ranchod Rai, right? Somebody who left the battlefield and ran away. But at that point, Krishna realized that jaan hai to jahan hai. If we survive, there will be a chance of dealing with Jarasangha. In this situation, there is no chance. Jarasangha is way more strong. Jarasandha is way more capable and we will all be destroyed. In this situation, saving my life and saving the community is a lot more important. And he goes away to Dwarka. We already saw the incident of where he is ready to break his pratigya because Arjun is not taking on Bhishma Pitama, right? There he realizes that all said and done, the army that is fighting for me is also my responsibility. And just for my pratigya, I cannot let them be butchered like this, right? So he's ready to break his pratigya. Krishna has shown that in action. But this is like walking on a very tight rope. We have to be careful here. Because does it make dharma a sagvadiyo dharma? We call it Gujarati sagvadiyo dharma, dharma of convenience. Whenever it's convenient for me, whenever my brother is in danger, I don't follow my pratigya. I violate my pratigya. But every time else, I expect the pratigya has to be followed. Is that the case? Because, our buddhi is very interesting. We can justify every action of ours. We can justify every situation as an apat, a very, very critical situation. Because for us, that might be a critical situation. So does it give a free hand for people to behave the way they want to? No, not at all. Krishna insists again and again that in normal situation or in any situation, ahimsa, satya, they are indeed important. Bhishma tells Yudhishthir that I am telling you this code of conduct of apat dharma because you are a dharmagrahi. You know what a dharma is. You live by the virtues. You are not trying to throw away the virtue as and when you like. You understand justice. So for people like you, a vipaschita, a wise man who understands and who is able to assess the situation very, very objectively, for him there is this code where there is this chance where you can understand dharma in a context. It is not always context free. You can understand dharma in a context. Now if we take Bhishma's own life, right? And if we have to plot a graph, say importance of an action. Now that importance can be importance to the person himself, little important, or it is central to his life like a pratigya, or it is important to the society as large, right? And what is the impact of it? Is it has, even if you don't do that action, is there going to be no impact? Could be, right? There might be a situation you might find a substitute, so there might not be a big impact. Or there is a short-term impact and there is a longer-term impact. So you have 6 boxes here. Now in entire Bhishma's life, his pivot was his pratigya. In the case when Satyavati asks him to marry the 2 princes and take over the reins of Hastinapur, he doesn't agree. Which is fine, right? Because he is in a box where central importance of the pratigya is really high. And there is an option, even if he doesn't marry, it is possible to get progeny, like it happened. So the impact also was really not that big a deal. But as time progressed, right, when Draupadi disrobing incident happened, when the war happened, the pratigya was still central to him. But what was the impact? Was the impact related to only his community? Maybe till the time of Draupadi incident. But what at the time of the war? It was not related to his own family anymore. There were so many other warriors who were participating. And maybe a lot of warriors who sided with Duryodhan had come there because Bhishma Pitama was on that side. Bhishma Pitama had this wish, right, where he would die only when he wants to. If Bhishma wouldn't have agreed to fight, would the situation be different? We don't know. We don't know. I'm just trying to put a framework to how conflicting decisions can be decided a little bit objectively, right? Importance and impact. One of our philosophers, B.K. Matilal, has done a lot of work on it. And he has some parameters that helps you define where that certain action or decision falls. This framework that I have is sort of inspired from that with some of my own parameters. And it is possible maybe at some other time to actually plot every decision that everybody took in that 9 by 9 box and see where everybody falls. Okay. Now we heard about Samanya Dharma, Apat Dharma. We heard about the subtlety of Dharma. Okay. We also said that It is not as if this can be used as a dharma of convenience and justify everything that has been happening. A satya is still a satya, a ahimsa is still ahimsa, right? But sometimes for protecting dharma, you have to do a ahimsa. That could be justified in a way, but it is not for everybody. Then what is in it for us? How should we define? One, as far as possible, we stick to the virtues defined for us. We stick to the code of conduct that is defined for us. Be it our organization, be it the words, or be it the code of conduct in a family, stick to it. But when there are problems, what do you do? So again, have a friend like Krishna, not like Karna who aggravates your tamsikta. But have a friend like Krishna, have guardians, develop guardians around you who can show you the right path, right? In Yaksha Prashna, Yudhishthir was asked that what is the right way, which is the right path? And he says, Mahajana yen gata sapantha. Wherever great people went, wherever wise people went, whatever precedent they set, maybe you follow that. Sometimes the precedent doesn't agree. Then what do? Seek counsel. Get help from people. A third person who can objectively tell you what is right or wrong. Now, the objective person himself has to be living through those kind of virtues to be able to guide. But what if all this is also not possible? Difficult, but Krishna says, Yogastha Kuru Karmani. Be established in balance. Be established in yoga. Let your neofrontal cortex be completely in your command. Let your emotions, let your pleasure, pain, your attachments, your feelings, your hatreds, let those emotions not cloud your brain to take a decision. Keep your brain clean of it. Become detached from what the results are going to be. Assess the situation objectively and then decide. We still don't know what the right or the wrong answer is, but at least that's the way we could go. So, yeah, I think this is it from my side. I hope I was able to bring out some aspects of dharma in Mahabharata. There's a lot more. Am I on time? Okay, almost. I have 2 more minutes. Are there any big questions? Okay, so I can see one question. Maybe I take that, and then the other questions, maybe I reply in the comment, right? Tarunji says, is truth changeable from time to time? The way I see this, right? One is the Sanatan truth. The Sanatan truth does not change. What is the Sanatan truth? That is the law of nature. But what is the Vyavharik truth? That could change from time to time, and not just from time to time. That could also change from Desh Kal, right? So the truth per se, what is truth? I understand truth as also dharma. Eternal dharma, Sanatan dharma, which ensures sustainability, that divine, if I may say, that governance doesn't change. We understand it or not is a different issue altogether, right? But at a Vyavharik level, at a practical level, code of conduct could change from time to time. The rules which were relevant in that era may not be relevant anymore, right? What is relevant in India might not be relevant in US. So there could be some aspect of that, and we have to adapt it according to where we are and how we live. Okay. Anyway, so this is a very controversial thought, right? Because how do we decide? And as I said, eventually it boils down to how well we can be objective in our lives and know for us what is dharma or adharma. There's one thing I would leave with, the definition of dharma per Manusmriti, and that sort of helps us also understand what is right or wrong. So what is dharma? Manusmriti says that what is told you by Vedas, what is told you by Smritis, all those virtues, yes. Then the last one he says, that which makes you happy. Now what makes you happy, right? Makes you happy is that which does not give you any guilty conscience. That will keep you eternally happy. If you don't have a guilt, you will be able to sleep properly. Now what will keep you free of that guilt? By doing the right thing. So if that perspective also you have, that we have in mind, that okay, I'm going to do that which gives me a better sleep at night, that is also a way of understanding dharma for ourselves. But as I said, there is eventually no right or wrong answer, and we decide for ourselves. Okay, so that is it. Thank you very much. बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद. Thanks a lot again, Sampadanand ji and Sri Aurobindo platform for giving me this opportunity. Thanks a lot.